Fact that when you talk about purity, you're not just talking about sexual purity.
No.
Purity is in so many other things. It's in your motivations, it's in your thoughts, it's in your what you do to someone else, whether you're thinking of you or whether you're thinking of them. All those things. Tell me a little bit more about the different ways that purity needs to be, even in our lives as adults.
We always start by defining what purity is, because purity could be about soap. You know, when people see our T-shirts that have PurityWorks on the front, they often ask us if we're a water company. Well, kind of in a spiritual kind of way, you know. But the whole point is, what is purity? And when you look at guarding the wellspring of the heart, who we are in the inner man, that's where purity begins. When Jesus was talking to the Pharisees in Matthew, he was talking about how you got to clean the inside of the cup first. And lots of times when I'm using a visual, I'll use a big white cappuccino cup and cover the inside with chocolate. And you can see how it's clean looking on the outside, but the inside it's really dirty. And if you leave that dirt there, then the outside of the cup is eventually going to look just like that too. And our lives are like that. So we have to start with the inside. Our kids need to know at their core what purity is, that it's about my heart. It's about keeping my heart clean. And then from there, you know, that's going to make sexual purity a no-brainer as they grow. It's going to give them a lot more opportunity to embrace it and own it themselves.
I don't want to, I'm just wondering, I'm just curious, as you're talking about this, I have to keep in mind that, you know, so many girls, that purity is stolen from them through abuse. And, you know, and so then they grow up feeling like, well, this isn't for me, or I'm not part of that. I can't reclaim that.
Absolutely.
Have you encountered girls like that, or parents who are dealing with that with their children? How do you communicate the message of purity to people who've experienced?
That's the great part of just being able to present grace and the fact that you can have a second chance. And when we share at events our testimony, you know, the burnt toast and everything, we're running this machine, this little not-for-profit, and everyone looks at us like, oh, you must have it all together. And we stand up and we just kind of lay it all out there for them to recognize that we didn't do these things, but God has given us a second chance. We're walking it out over again. We're letting him let us start over. I know with the princess, it's kind of an ideal. So are many of the teachings of Jesus. They're ideals. And we've all fallen. We've all strayed. We've all gone our own way. And we all need to return. So we really try to make it clear to parents that there isn't a person alive who has pursued purity successfully, or whoever will, but what we need is the grace to start over.
That's good.
Really
and
try to focus on that.
As you alluded to earlier, there is one person, and that is Jesus.
You're right.
And when he left us his Holy Spirit. He said, I will give you the strength you need through the Holy Spirit. And that is the doorway into strength and wisdom like we never dreamed we could have when we invite his Holy Spirit to give us that fortitude.
As far as practical things, I'm just, you know, I'm looking back and saying, for parents who say they have a 5-year-old daughter or a son. So when you're talking about, you know, purity, is it things like as far as instilling that in them, in their mind, but also is it practical things like do you talk about, you know, internet, television, friendships, things that they're learning at school, like in very practical ways, parents are going, yeah, but here I am bombarded and immersed in a culture that is so against that, against anything sort of pure.
Yeah, that's so important. That's so important. And if you go online and look at some of the books we have, one of them is a preschool book that's for preschool moms that's all scripted and repeatable lessons, just lessons about the 5 doors where you can act things out with the child. You know, when you're talking about guarding the eyes physically, you use sunglasses, but when you guard the eyes spiritually, you evaluate what you're looking at and how it will affect your heart. And even young children can catch on to that. When we talk about the mouth, we talk about the fact that when you eat good food, you're healthy, and when you don't, then you're unhealthy, and that you would never drink bleach because bleach is poison. Well, why would you take anything into your ears that is poison, that's bleach, or through your eyes that would be bleach and would hurt you? You know, all the different ways and stories that we can tell to just help kids recognize they are in charge of their hearts. They can own the cleanliness of their hearts. And it's amazing how little children can catch on to that. I hear a lot of very small girls say, I'm not going to kiss Billy because I'm saving my kiss. And I just think, you know, when they're small, if they can capture that concept, they will carry that with them.
Well, I wondered, so what did you say to your 5-year-old daughter who says, look, everybody's dating, everyone's got boyfriend and girlfriends, what about me? Because, I mean, it's a long time to wait till, what, 30 you were going to let her date? Is that?
35. Well, that's one of the subjects that we really approach when we do events, too, is just the whole aspect of dating and the fact that dating is a choice. It's not a requirement. And it isn't truly a biblical concept. It's a cultural concept. So if it is, how do we do it in a way that glorifies God? Or do we choose not to date in our family systems? And in our family, we've made that choice that dating will not be a part of our family culture. But we've talked to our girls about that since they're very, very young. It's different if you bring it up with a teenager, so you may have a different, way to go there if you have somebody who's already dating. But just considering that, what does that word mean? Why do we do it? What's the purpose behind it? And is it the best choice for our children? A lot of questions that parents don't always think of until they get there and all of a sudden their child's just dating, because everyone's dating and they're asking the questions and we haven't even thought about it. And we're encouraging parents with even really young children, or even before they become parents, to talk about those things and know what their hearts are going to be set on, so that their child will have every opportunity to embrace those values as they grow.
Wow, I remember that interview. That was so rich. It was so good. Really timely for us as parents, because our children are bombarded with sex everywhere. I mean, it's in commercials. It's interwoven in so many TV programs and advertisements, girls, that really to teach our children about purity early is really the key, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think why I just love that interview is that it's something that we have. It was a time and place to open up the discussion about sexuality. For so many of us, we have struggled with the burnt toast. For some of us, sexual promiscuity, the struggle of not being a virgin before you get married, the struggles that some of my buddies have of pornography, or my single girlfriends that struggle with, I want to have sex, but I'm not married, what do I do? And so these are things, whether you're in the church or not, that we struggle with, our minds, and the oversaturation that, being sexy and being promiscuous is a good thing, because you want the guy to look at you and then you've got it all together and you've got, you have that power. And I think it's important, especially for women, to stand strong in that. And not just like don't have sex, but purity. I think what was really, for me, because I struggled so much with my own sexuality and that as I was trying to navigate my teen years, because there was so much at me. And, there are some times I wish, people, mentors and older people would come to me to say, Melinda, let's talk about this. Let's talk about how you see yourself and how God sees you. And I think the key for me, it was, one day I was, with some really safe friends, and they decided, what, we're going to call you on some things and then we're going to pray for you. And it was like, for that moment, I finally was allowed to share all the struggles I had of myself, my regrets, and I was able to talk with somebody openly and then be forgiven and be released. And I think that's the key. A lot of people in the church, outside of the church, they're racked with this guilt. And I think we need to be open-handed and free to talk about this with grace and humility and extend forgiveness from that kind of pain. And and God does that. I honestly, I'm 35, went through a whole crazy life, and feel free and released from so much of the pain that I carried when, from mistakes that I had made.
I also think that there's probably a lot of people that are watching today, mothers and even grandmothers, who are feeling guilty right now, thinking, why wasn't I more aware, or why wasn't I more on top of it? And but now it's talked about more often, and it is more open. So I think we also need to allow ourselves to forgive, for how we've raised our children, because, in the women's ministry that I do, you meet so many women that have grown children that are all messed up, and they're feeling so guilty. And I think for them to be released, knowing that they did the best that they could at the time, and being aware and being open and not being afraid to maybe pull someone aside like people did that really cared for you and loved you and were willing to just to be real and to be